Complaining is damaging to almost every area of our lives. The biggest challenge I find with complaining is that it keeps us focused on the problem rather than looking for potential solutions. It keeps us focused on the challenges at hand rather than dreaming and visioning the way things can be. My family and I have horses, and sometimes we'll go riding, and we have an extra horse. Her name is Dove, and Dove was an old riding camp horse. Anybody can ride Dove. And I can remember one time we were riding, and this friend was ahead of me on Dove, and he said, "There's something wrong with this horse." "What do you mean?" "She's turning to the right, and then she's turning to the left." Now, I know Dove. Dove will just follow along. I could see the problem. This person's body was turned to the right, and Dove would go to the right. She would sense it and go in that direction. Or his body would be turned to the left, and she would sense it, and she would go in that direction. Our lives move in the direction of our predominant thoughts. Our thoughts create our lives, and our words indicate what we're thinking. And if we're complaining, then we are saying to the world, if not to ourselves, that we are thinking negatively, and that's the direction we're going to go. Our thoughts create our lives, and our words indicate what we are thinking. If we are complaining all the time, we are, by definition, thinking negative thoughts. There's a great story of two construction workers who meet for lunch, and the first one opens his lunchbox, and he looks in and he goes, "Ugh, a meatloaf sandwich. I hate meatloaf sandwiches." His friend doesn't say anything. So the next day the two meet up, and the first one opens his lunchbox again, and he goes, "Ugh, another meatloaf sandwich. I hate meatloaf sandwiches." His friend is quiet. The third day they meet up again. The first one opens his lunchbox and he goes, "I've had it. Day in and day out, it's the same thing. Meatloaf sandwich after meatloaf sandwich. I want something else." And his friend says, "Why don't you ask your wife to make you something else?" The first one says, "I make my own lunch." We make our own lunch by the thoughts that we think, as evidenced by the words that we speak.
Negativity was impacting the salon in different ways. I mean, example, little things just wouldn't satisfy them, like types of gloves to do chemical service wasn't good enough. You know, it had to be a certain kind, and it got to the point to where it was like, well, if I'm doing all this for you, what am I getting in return? So if maybe, changing the way we're seeing things would help guide them in a better way, and it kind of moved some people out of the salon.
They were just taken back by it, like, oh, how could you not complain, and how can you not gossip and like get worked up about these little things? And the longer I did the challenge, I realized that it's not hard. Like, once you retrain your thinking and retrain your heart almost into not being negative, then your words and your actions are really changed. And
someone comes up with an idea, and there's always 10 different answers of how we should do it. And most of them are on the complaint side rather than the positive side. And I think that's the reason that this is so good. It makes you think positive.
We sit down before every dinner, and we sit there and we go through it of what we're joyful for that day, and we go back and forth that I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for this experience, I'm thankful for this experience, I'm thankful for this experience, and we're always focused on the positive. And it gets to be a habit, and we don't have the criticism and the negative. And that's where it all started with the bracelet.
Albert Einstein said, "Reality is just an illusion, albeit a very persistent illusion." Our thoughts create our lives, and our words indicate what we are thinking.
When I gave people the bracelets, the reactions were typically, "I need this." Everyone knew they needed it. Everyone seemed to know that they gossiped, that they talked about people. And they were completely aware of their problems. They just wanted a vehicle that would help them stop. They needed that prop. They needed that purple bracelet to remind them of what they were doing wrong.
If we're complaining all the time, then we are by nature and by definition thinking negative thoughts, and therefore we're going to draw negative experiences to us. Complaining is also damaging to our health, both our physical health and our emotional health. We hear the term psychosomatic. Well, we are all psychosomatic. Being psychosomatic does not mean a neurotic person. We're all psychosomatic. Psyche, soma, mind, body. The mind and the body are intricately connected, and the body responds to the thoughts that are held in the mind. Dr. Robin Kowalski at the University of Clemson discovered that from interviewing thousands of doctors, doctors estimate that they spend as much as 2/3 of their time dealing with people whose physical illness is either based in or exacerbated by their mental processes. In other words, they are thinking sick and it is manifesting sick in their bodies, as much as 2/3. The way she puts it is, symptoms increase with symptom reporting. We all know people who complain frequently about their health. Right before we gave out these complaint-free bracelets for the very first time, a man started attending my church. His name is Tom Allier. Tom suffers from chronic migraine headaches, and every day when he would come home, his wife Misha would say, "How was your day?" Now, Tom, instead of telling her what happened during the day, gave her the headache report. He'd say, "Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, I had about a 7 headache all day today." Now, she wasn't asking him about his headaches, but that's what he talked about. And he suffered migraines the entire time. Now, as part of becoming complaint-free, Tom stopped complaining about his headaches. When Tom stopped complaining about his headaches using the complaint-free bracelet, Tom no longer has migraine headaches at all. This has had such an impact on Tom that Tom is now the president of the Complaint-Free World, our nonprofit organization. Our goal is to get 60 million people around the world to wear these bracelets and go 21 days without complaining. If we can transform the consciousness of 60 million people, that's just 1% of the world, we can transform the consciousness of the world. About 2 years ago, I was called to the hospital to see a woman who had suffered a stroke. She was a longtime member of our church, and before I went in to see her, I did as I often did. I stopped at the nurse's station, and her doctor was standing there at the nurse's station. And they said, "She's fine." The doctor said, "She's fine. She's had a mild stroke. She'll be going home in a few days. She'll recover completely." So I knocked on her door, and she said, "Who is it?" I said, "Jane, it's Will Bowen." "Oh, thank God you're here. I'm dying." I said, "You're what?" She said, "I'm dying." And I thought, well, this is great. Nobody's told her that she's not dying. I get to be the one to give her the good news. So I said, "I just talked to the doctor. She said you've had a mild stroke. You'll be home in a few days." She said, "I'm dying." Luckily, about that time, the doctor walked into the room. So I said to the doctor, "Would you please tell her what you just told me? She thinks she's dying." And the doctor walked over and she said, "Jane, hon, you're not dying. You've had a mild stroke. You'll be home in 3 days. You'll recover completely. You'll be home playing with your cat Marty before you know it." And Jane said, "Thank you." The doctor walked out of the room. And Jane said to me, "Would you get a pen and a piece of paper?" I said, "Sure, why?" She said, "We have to plan my funeral. I'm dying." Now, it sounds funny to hear that, but the bottom line to it isn't funny. 10 days later, I officiated in her funeral. The mind and the body are intricately connected, and when we complain about our health, we tend to have more health problems to complain about.
To me, there's been improved health results. Lots of students have headaches, and they've reported on things like that.